Welcome to Sense of Style, I'm Stuart, and as somebody that likes refined and sophisticated fragrances, I have noticed that it's a lot easier to get something that is sophisticated but more reserved, more subtle, than it is to get something that is sophisticated and bold and strong. And look, I've said many times on the channel, I've used the word subtle, I don't know how many times. I definitely do prefer that. But that's not all I want to wear. We have different moods, we have different situations, seasons, and so yeah, if you're looking for something bold and sophisticated, it can be a little bit harder to find. However, I managed to dig up 8 fragrances like that from my collection. Let's get to it. There can be a big cultural difference in how sophistication is interpreted. There's a huge difference between French minimalist sophistication, which is definitely more conservative, definitely quieter, than Italian sophistication, which is definitely more extroverted and bold. And for that reason, I'm going with Valentino Uomo Intense. And when it comes to that heavy iris fragrance combination, this is definitely a lot bolder than a fragrance it's often compared to, which is Uomo Intense. And this is French sophistication. You can even see it in the bottle. This very sleek lines, it's a very clean, minimalist bottle. But then you've got the rock stud motif that Valentino used in their fashion here. Definitely a little bit more loud and extroverted. So yeah, you can see the cultural differences even in the bottle. But then when you carry it over to the scent, it's even more amplified. So this is a ton of iris with a lot of sweetness from vanilla and tonka. And Uomo Intense is also a lot of iris, but the sweetness is way more toned down. You're going to get ambrette and a little bit of pear, very subtle sweetness, so people don't really pick up a whole lot as compared to this, which has a lot more sweetness and a leather note, which is also another bold note. It's also very loud and it projects a ton, and that leads to the next point, is projection. This is a very strong fragrance with a lot of projection, whereas Uomo Intense, more moderate projection. Both very strong fragrances, both last a long time, but the projection is different. And you know, even when it comes down to seductiveness, the two cultures are very different. This is definitely more reserved, very sophisticated, but this is way more openly seductive. You've got a lot of projection. You've got that sweet quality. You've got the macho leather going. Yeah, very different cultural context. And for what we want today, we're going with this one. Fragrance number 2, not surprisingly, is also an Italian house. This is Bvlgari Man in Black, and I think the boldness of this fragrance hits you right away. There's a lot of bold notes here. You're going to get leather, you're going to get rum, you're going to get tobacco, and you're also going to get some sweet and spiciness. There's a spices note. You're going to get some tonka and benzoin. And so yeah, very, very, I think bold and in a dark way, but the sophisticated element is more subtle until you compare it to the fragrance this is most often compared to, which is Spice Bomb. And then you start to pick up, and it's difficult otherwise, you start to pick up the floral element here. It is very subtle, but it's there. You've got 2 floral notes in the heart. You've got iris and tuberose. And when you compare it to Spice Bomb, you notice that this has a subtle creaminess that Spice Bomb doesn't have. Spice Bomb is a lot spicier, it's a lot more bold, but it's less sophisticated, it's less mature, and so I think this is a much better option if you like that kind of scent, and I certainly do. And you know, all of that sophisticated stuff aside, it's very rare for a fragrance to come out and be both a critical and commercial success. This fragrance was huge seller in the Middle East, big seller in the West, and quite frankly, it won Fragrance of the Year in the luxury edition for the Fragrance Foundation Awards, so the critics loved it. The general population loved it. I mean, this is an all-around great fragrance, whether it's bold, subtle, or whatever. I've been very, very supportive of the House of Hugo Boss because they're taking creative risks. A perfect example is Boss the Scent Magnetic. This is exactly the kind of perfumery that I like. It's way more than marketing. This was a huge gamble. And when you look to see, like, what's going on? Like, how do I know it's a gamble? Just start with the perfumer. The perfumer here is Delphine Lebeau. Not a big profile at all. And also, nothing to do with Hugo Boss. It's her very first Hugo Boss fragrance, and yet she was tasked with a release like this. That's the first sign, because when they take a risk, they don't want to sully the name of a big perfumer. with a risk, or someone in-house. So they get someone from the outside. They give them a chance to prove themselves. And if it goes bad, well, you had your chance and no one in Hugo Boss gets hurt. And that's exactly what they did here. And you want further evidence how risky this was? When was the last time you heard of bran as being a focal point of a fragrance, never mind a men's fragrance? I mean, there's bran in the heart here. That's crazy. But if it was just bran, that'd be one thing. Then you're going to get black vanilla husk in the base. It's basically the pod of the vanilla. Vanilla pods are much more powdery than regular vanilla. And so you got the powderiness of the black vanilla husk and the powderiness of the bran. And you know what? I honest to God believe that this is the most powdery sweet fragrance I have ever tried by far. It might well be the most powdery fragrance that I have ever tried. And so they took a huge risk. They took the gourmandy trend. They added a ton of maninka fruit, so it's very, very fruity, very, very sweet. But they made it super powdery. I've never smelled anything like that before, and that's the kind of thing that I love. That's why I really, I'm a big supporter of what Hugo Boss is doing. You know, it worked out well for everybody. Fragrance number 4 was a complete no-brainer when it came to this topic. It is Serge Lutens Chergui. The boldness is very evident. It is a very strong projector. It lasts 10 hours on my skin. I would say 10 to 12 on most people. And even the juice here is bold. It's a dark brown. This is the one fragrance I have that I don't spray on clothes. For the sophisticated element, I think there are a few things. This is an important fragrance in the cultural context, because back in 2001, there really wasn't such a thing as sweet tobacco. But like 15, 20 years ago, it was so popular. It was one of the fragrances that popularized the entire genre. But then the composition of the fragrance is also more sophisticated than even brands like Parfum de Marly's Herod, which, you know, is seen as a super high quality. But that's fairly simple in its construction. It's a lot of vanilla, it's a lot of tobacco and spices, namely cinnamon. Not so here. You're going to get a sweetness that's very different. It's honey, amber, and hay. So it's an earthier sweetness. And then even the tobacco is different because it's got incense to back it up. So it's a little smokier than the standard tobacco note. So yeah, the construction of the fragrance is different. And I think finally it comes down to it's got floral notes, right? And so I mentioned Man in Black as being, you know, the powderiness is difficult to find. It's there. This one, not so much. You know, you wear this a couple times, you'll definitely pick up a powdery element because you're dealing with iris and rose, and there's even some sandalwood that gives it a little bit of creamy / powderiness. So yeah, it's not going to be hard to find. This is something of a legend. I think it balances really nicely, you know, the boldness and the sophistication. Fragrance number 5, we're coming back to Hugo Boss. This is Hugo Boss bottled Oud Saffron. And yes, I am talking about Oud here because I know not everybody likes Oud, but I do think it is at very least exotic. I think being exotic definitely falls in, to a certain extent, the sophisticated element. But even Oud, even if it wasn't exotic, I think to me Oud smells like wealth. I've heard other people say that too. It smells very rich and deep. I think it has, and that's one of the reasons why people like Oud in the first place. It smells special, and I think it fits. So yeah, and in terms of performance here, oh my God, this is like another fragrance that's 10 to 12 hours longevity, and another fragrance that has tons and tons of projection. You do tend to get a lot of that in Oud. But the great thing about this, again, I'm going to say nice things about Hugo Boss. They released Hugo Boss bottled Oud, and I think it was 2015. And yes, it was Oud, but there was still tons of that sort of apple pie DNA that Hugo Boss likes to stick in anything, whether it's related to it or not. And I really don't think it was related to Oud. The fragrance did quite well. But the Oud specialists, people like me, the Oud snobs, and people in the Middle East especially, were not too happy with it. And so 4 years later, they came out with this. And they kind of, made it up to us and, our Middle Eastern friends, because they made a real Oud fragrance. There is a hint. There's still a hint of the Boss bottled apple pie DNA, but far less than in Boss bottled Oud. And I mean, it's just a really nice, underrated, underappreciated scent. Much like Chergui, fragrance number 6 is bold right away. It's very, very obvious. It's the original Terre d'Hermes. And this fragrance is so bold that it puts a lot of people off. Like me, when I've tried this, I mean, literally, I've said this many times. It took me 2 years before I'd even put it on again. I mean, I really didn't like it. Now, I understand vetiver is challenging, but Jean-Claude Elena did not help vetiver in any way. He added the minerality of that flint note. He added so much vetiver that it burnt the orange, right? That people talk about a burnt or a dull orange kind of feel as along with the grapefruit. I mean, the citrus didn't smell right. So this is a very challenging fragrance. But this is one of those fragrances where when you figure out vetiver and the best places to wear it and when it really has an impact, and when you start to understand that and dress really well when you wear this, you start to realize that it has a sophisticated element to it. But you really got to be into fragrances a lot and for a long time before you can understand vetiver, and especially before you can understand Terre d'Hermes. If you are making a list of sophisticated notes, I guarantee cotton candy would be very near the bottom of that list, and yet somehow Franck Boclet's Velvet managed to make a fragrance with cotton candy that is still very sophisticated and very high quality. The fact that I even bought this fragrance with cotton candy in the notes is going to require a bit of an explanation, but basically back in the day, Fragrance Buy used to include some samples when you made a purchase. One time I got 3. I was really happy. Didn't like 2 of them, but I really liked this, and I had no idea what it was. But I mean, I was hooked. So immediately I went to Fragrantica, I looked at the note breakdown, and was really disappointed to see not only cotton candy, but also peach, orange, and plum. So a definite feminine feel. And then I figured out the house, when something comes, like all of them are unisex, but when something comes in a white bottle, it's usually leaning feminine. And if it's in a black bottle, it's usually leaning masculine. So white bottle, you know, you got all those fruity notes, you've got cotton candy. And this was before I was okay with unisex fragrances, but I liked it so much, I bought it anyway. And this fragrance, though, is saved with the sandalwood. There's both cedar and sandalwood in it, but there's enough woods here. It greatly tones down the sweetness of the cotton candy. I don't actually get cotton candy. What I get is, you know, a little bit of sweetness and fruitiness mixed with the woods. And, you know, the thing about Franck Boclet, it's just like Louis Vuitton or Tom Ford. Yeah, technically it's a designer house, but the quality here, I mean, the quality of the presentation, the quality of the fragrance itself, the quality of the performance, everything about it is niche level. And it really does, especially with that sandalwood, that creaminess of the sandalwood, have a sophisticated feel, or at least that's my interpretation of it. And I really like it. This is one of those ones that I'm not trying to gatekeep it or anything, but yeah, it's really good. This might be controversial, but I do think you can have a sophisticated clone. This is Aftermath by Fragrance World, and this is a clone of Initio's Side Effect. Now, Side Effect, lovely fragrance. I mean, a classic case of a very bold fragrance. I mean, you look at the notes, you're going to get tobacco and rum, you're going to get vanilla and cinnamon, but it's done in such a high quality way that it does have a sophisticated air to it. And I mean, it just does smell really, really nice. It smells high quality. I get really good performance with it. I know people talk about Lattafa a lot, but for me, Fragrance World, definitely my #1 clone house. I mean, I need to try a few more Lattafas before I make my firm conclusion. But yeah, this one is really, really nice. And, you know, as usual with clones, it's not super expensive. But yeah, this one works for me. And I do think this was a difficult topic, very, very difficult to get both bold. I definitely think that sophistication lends itself to minimalism. It lends itself to, you know, quieter, more introverted fragrances. But, you know, as the Italian showed, you don't have to be introverted to be sophisticated. Anyway, thanks for watching.